Okay, so what else do you have in that Bernard deck?
Listen, I got a bunch of splicers, man. I've got some token doublers. We're going to hope and pray that I get some removal that's not artifact based for the whole board.
Question.
Yes.
So you're saying you know this deck well.
Nah.
So you don't know the Muffin Man?
Man, doesn't even f***ing know the Muffin Man.
Y'all
Oh, we
can't.
gotta redo it. We can't say.
Why?
We can't know.
Why
I
not?
can say
Also, you both are dunces. You're sitting here talking about the Muffin Man. The dude makes gingerbread men.
Somebody
so-
did not watch Shrek enough as a child, and
no,
it shows.
No, he's a confectioner, Jacob. He doesn't just make gingerbread people.
It literally says gingerbread sculptor.
Not
What
the
do
gumdrop
you mean?
buttons.
Not the gumdrop buttons.
I stand by my statement. He's a confectioner.
Well, after that derailing, welcome back into the Thought Vessel. I'm your host, Levi. As always, with me, I have Jacoby the Phyrexian and Dr. Jenkinstein, a.k.a. Joe.
Welcome to the table.
Yes, welcome.
So starting off today, we're talking something a little bit outside of the world of magic. We're talking about our roommate horror stories.
Bum, bum, bum.
Roommate horror stories.
Now, I'll go ahead and start us off because mine is kind of an interesting situation that it didn't really happen to me as much, but it happened to my friends that happened to be staying over on that night. And this is actually how I figured out I was deaf in one of my ears. So I have a roommate who kept really weird hours. Like he would wake up and start vacuuming at 6 a.m. and stuff like that. And one particular night when I was working at my old job, our routine was I would get off of work super late on Fridays. So my friend would come over. He had a weird schedule as well. So we would hang out, pretty much stay up as late as possible on Friday and just kind of hang out on the weekends and then go back to our scheduled programming after that point. So we did this again, hanging out, working on Magic the Gathering decks. He fell asleep. The next day I saw him and he was really annoyed because apparently my roommate at like 4 a.m. started blasting the Power Rangers theme song on his TV. And he's like, how did that not wake you up? I don't know. It turns out at this point, I had a viral attack on my ear that actually, at this point, I'm actually fully deaf in my left ear. I've got a 4% hearing. So I was sleeping on my right shoulder, so I had no idea this was going on for the entire time. And then, one night I slept on I tried to sleep on the left side. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is a problem. So absolutely crazy. How about you, Jacoby?
I'm all right. I was there for this experience, and let me tell you, never, ever have I wanted to strike someone so bad. Because it not only woke up our mutual friend, it woke me up, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, there is no way this guy right now is listening to Go Go Power Rangers on loop at like the highest volume I think his TV could handle.
He was a very interesting guy.
It was bonkers.
Yeah. And your horror story?
Oh, okay. So I had this roommate. We're going to call him Jeff because I don't want to name names. But
I love you, Jeff. Don't. It's not him.
Plot twist, he's actually Jeff.
he's actually Jeff. No. So Jeff was a roommate I had. We lived together for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of interesting intricacies to our friendship in the house. He was an introverted shut-in by definition. I only leave my room to procure food and to go to work. And then if you bother me, it has to be in my room because I don't leave my space type deal. We playing Magic in the living room one day, right? At this point, most of us aren't super educated on how the stack works and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. Casual table.
We had a casual table. A friend showed up and he was going over the stack. My buddy didn't understand it and was super mad because he was getting interacted in the middle of trying to count or something, right? Proceeds to flip the table. And I mean literally flip the table with all of our stuff on it. And it turned into somehow a coffee mug hitting our ceiling, shattering, and there being a shard of the coffee mug wedged into the roof.
Holy shit.
And he's a small dude. This is not like some jacked beefcake. This is like 120-pound nerd, like, eh. And he managed somehow to cause our roof to leak for the next like year and a half.
That's what you get with the rage.
No rage quite like nerd rage.
Yeah, seriously. See, mine's just back in college. I had a nice little knock on my door at 6 a.m. on a Friday.
As you do, of course, in college. Yeah, everyone's awake at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and it was the local sheriff's department wondering about my roommate because they found out he was selling drugs.
Fun, always.
Was he there?
No, he actually went on the run. Like, literally, it was like 2 nights before, like, he was leaving the apartment. He was just taking things out of, like, drawers out of our, like, kitchenette. And, like, I had to pretty much tell him, don't touch that stuff. That stuff I brought. That is mine. And that's when I found out during that Friday, oh, he was selling drugs. Great. I was woken up for this. I didn't have a class until, like, 12.
Oh, that's just far enough to be, like, annoying. Like, if I go to sleep, I might miss the class. But if I don't sleep, I'm going to be drowsy all day. That's awful.
Yeah, no, like he was absolutely a piece of shit. Do not like him. He could go on his own way.
That's fair enough.
Gotcha. So did you have any inclination that this was going on at all before the sheriff?
The best I got was that he seemed like he was a pothead. Like, whenever I interacted with him, it didn't seem like he was all there. But selling things, not so much.
Gotcha.
Like, they found crushed up pills for, like, snorting.
Oh,
that kind of
jeez.
shit.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I'm glad you're out of that situation for sure. But this does bring us into our first topic today of Am I the Arch Enemy? Joe, would you like to read this out for us?
Yes. Am I the arch enemy? My roommate has an Alloro Ageless Aesthetic EDH commander deck that I've banned from being used in the apartment. He runs it with 80% of the deck being enchantments that lock down the game and a single creature that acts as enchantment graveyard retrieval. The rest is various instants and artifacts. There really isn't a comparable amount of enchantment removal to deal with him. The game stalls out and he ends up being the only person able to actually play anything, and then once he gets bored of playing, he drops Divine Intervention and times out the game 2 turns later in a draw. The deck is non-interactive and prevents anyone else from actually playing Magic, and it makes playing and the night less fun. I've told him I don't mind him using it at our LGS, especially since it can be a bit competitive there. But as far as playing at home is concerned, I'm just trying to wind down from the day, and the deck doesn't allow me to do that. It's not like he lacks a supply of other decks to use either. He owns maybe 10 to 13 of the precons and about 3 or 4 other homebrews that are not nearly as oppressive. Hell, he even has an Atraxa Stacks deck that I'd prefer to play against. I think it's also worth noting that this deck of his is only used when we are playing with other people. It doesn't work well one-on-one, so he would not usually try to use it playing just against me. Am I the asshole because I don't want to spend money I don't have to build a deck to compete specifically against one single deck? We haven't spoken in 3 days now, and the few times he has addressed me, he was extremely venomous and spiteful. He has also threatened to sell all of his cards and stop playing completely over this.
Oh boy. So when I read these type of comments and these types of scenarios here, one thing that I'm always keeping in mind is we're getting one person's perspective, and I'm trying to see in my head, I'm trying to put myself in that person's shoes. So clearly his 2 signature decks, as it were, one of them is a highly oppressive type of enchantress type deck that has a Loro who's every turn you're getting an extra 2 life to kind of elongate your ability to play. And then you have Atraxa Stacks. So those are your 2 strategies to win with those types of games. And I can understand a little bit where if that's the thing you like to do and then everyone's upset whenever you play, that's the thing you like to do. But my guy, you have 10 to 13 other decks you can play. Like, why are you only playing Allura? Like, is a spot where you think that's the only deck that stands a chance to win and you're consistently wanting to play, but you're not even like, it sounded like he's trying to get to end in a draw every time too.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the strategy is anything but because the guy threatening to sell all his stuff, he's like, I'm gonna be done with Magic if I don't get to use this deck. It sounds like it's petty nonsense. It's like, if I don't get to insult you and or not let you not have fun, I just don't want to participate.
Jacob, did you forget to turn the sound off on your phone?
Maybe.
We're professional here.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts, Joe?
So I truthfully think that the roommate is the one being completely unreasonable. Literally, it is just the fact that he came to him and said, "Hey, I just don't want to play this when I'm winding down. I don't mind playing it any other situation, but at home I would just like to not do that." Setting a pretty firm boundary and just being like, "Hey, I can face it any other time. Right now, no." And then the fact of the matter is that the person is immensely spiteful about a boundary being set. It goes back to that like turn zero talk. What you are comfortable with for anything. And if you set a boundary and then somebody acts venomous for that boundary, I would not want to be around that person.
Yeah, and in addition to that, like in the context of this one half of this conversation, it sounds like you've given them every other opportunity to try to participate with the deck elsewhere. You're just like, hey, we're at home. I don't want to do this. It'd be hard stretched, in my opinion, to call the writer the asshole rather than the roommate.
Yeah.
I suppose that's fair. It kind of comes back to Shivan Bhat with Casual Magic. He always had a quote that said, "I don't want to have to play 15 removal spells to operate a game of Commander in my meta." So it's a spot where you might know what you have to do, but it might just not be pleasant enough to actually do it. And that definitely seems to be the situation here with this kind of a deck.
Yeah, and especially if you look at some of the comments of that same post where they're saying that the poster is the asshole by just him not changing his deck is on him, you not changing your deck is on you. But like that's not the point of the conversation. That was a boundary being set, and the boundary is being crossed, and very, very, very extremely as well.
This is another situation where we never talk enough about etiquette and how, and this might be a game where there's strategy and there's like, oh, you're always trying to win, but there's a right and wrong way to attempt to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, like you wouldn't say that kind of phrasing in a tournament setting, because tournament, that's no holds bar. This is in the privacy of their own home that they just don't want to deal with this. Like if you were trying to just be this kind of person to your roommate who is just like asking, please do not do this, I feel for that roommate.
Now, a couple other points that I would, kind of want to look at here is he doesn't really dive too far into how the information was presented. Like I could kind of see a little bit if you're reading this as the roommate is coming in like super aggressively about the situation. And then, if I'm getting yelled at, I'm probably not going to appreciate that. So I can get that a little bit. Another thing to think of here is with the Allura deck, he has an LGS he can play this at. This isn't just like a you can never play this anywhere kind of situation.
And he makes an active point to build on that he goes, play it at our local LGS. Like they apparently, in the context of here, they go to one together.
Yeah.
So I think you could deduce that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, this is less about being an asshole within Magic and just being an asshole as a person.
Yeah. Now, as devil's advocate, in the air of if you even could be the asshole, dear writer, the only context I foresee this, one thing we don't know, what are your decks? If you're per saying, like, if your stuff is equally as toxic and he's being this way because he feels, fight fire with fire, because some players just love to build toxic decks to deal with toxic players. That's a context we do not have in this scenario. We see all of your roommates' decks, but we don't see anything about what you're building.
And that's one thing that I've noticed as well, especially online, where if the situation comes up that somebody's playing at a commander table, or kind of with strangers, LGS, and they come out really strong and they win the game. They may have not been aware of the power level at the table. Maybe they just had a strong start, and then one person assumes like, hey, this person is pub stomping. And then they go bring out a deck, and without communicating like, hey, I think that was too strong for the pod, they're like, I'm just going to play a deck that has like 20 counter spells and make sure you don't get to do a thing. So now the person says, I won a game, and now this one person is making it so I can't play my Arcane Signet on turn 4. And they're going to get upset because they think that they're getting disproportionately targeted, which they are, and they don't know why. So we're having the situation that, one person's thinking that, person 2 is a pub stomper, and person 2 is thinking person 1 is just an absolute jerk.
Yeah.
And it's easy to look at something like the example you gave us, the Aloro deck, and be like, man, that guy is really an asshole, because there are not many players out here who want to sit there and draw 90 cards and do nothing.
Yeah. Not to mention that Aloro has one of those kind of boogeyman effects.
Which I think could lead us into our next topic for right now.
Thank you for that, Jacoby. And our next topic here, a little bit of a story time. Penny, for your thoughts, talking about when I went to the SCG Con in Charlotte. So I was in a commander just event. We had some free passes, signed up. I had built a more powered down +1/+1 counter synergy political stuff, a Brina deck. Brina Demagogue. If you don't know, whenever an opponent or you attack somebody who's not in last place on life total, that person gets to draw a card. You get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on one of your creatures. If it's you do both. So a little bit of politics, not the strongest thing in the world, but I'm a big fan of owls. It's an owl. I wanted to build it. So
also a little bit more context. The rest of that text also says, and not you.
Yes, you can't swing it.
It has to be last place, not you.
Mm-hmm. So I bring out the deck. Another person at the table is playing this really unique, it's like a rotating background commander. So it ended up being the Mata Red that he rolled for combat. There's the Warhammer 40K teamer deck, and then a 5-color Kenrith. So I bring out, I reveal Brina, and then one of the players' eyes gets really big and was like, oh no, it's Brina. We have to kill this person. And the other two players, for probably the first 6 turns of the game or so, I felt like a little bit of a disproportionate amount of hate towards me, and then they kind of calmed down. But he kind of kept attacking me the whole game. And this is kind of what we brought the definition to, is what we call the Boogeyman Effect, which is what we're going to talk about here today. So the Boogeyman Effect is, I try to put down to a definition, the phenomenon in which a previously impactful game against a commander causes the player to drastically overvalue the power level of a deck based on the commander played. So what is happening is someone in his local meta had a highly competitive Brina deck, I'm assuming maybe with some combos or just a higher price point, and they were expecting this to be a lot stronger than it was, just simply from past experience.
And some good cards that typically present this Boogeyman Effect are cards with a lot of text or a lot of value on them. Things like Joda that have this block of text, the new Wooburg Joda that says, Cascade on Legends. Things that say, hey, when you do something, generate X type of value, tend to raise people's eyebrows and giant red flag, hold up.
Yeah, especially since Joda Grand Unifier has been proven to be in the hell queue on Arena. So many people have experience with facing a Joda deck. Even if it's bad, it can just outvalue you 10 out of 10 times.
Now, and that's part of it too. I think there is a little bit of a difference between having a commander that's earned that kind of reputation. If you're sitting down, I think the biggest victim of this was anyone who bought a precon in 2016 and put together a Timna Thrasios list as Merfolk Tribal or something, not realizing that was the most powerful CDH commander pair at the time, and they would immediately get hated out, or even just out of just sheer curiosity.
Or like a great example at our local LGS, I have a Krark deck. Same vibes. It's a tribal deck. It does punchy wizard things, but it's not like on that list. But the combination exists in a CDH format, and it makes people raise their eyebrows really high.
Yep, and that is definitely fair. Where you can try to tell people like, hey, it's not that list. I think the first step here is trying to just address the boogeyman out front. Sometimes, maybe even half the time, it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, for example, I run a Tulane Blink deck just because it's in the colors. A lot of people will immediately assume that, hey, this is a food chain combo deck or a CDH. It's still strong, but if I tell people like, we're not running food chain, we're not running the Drake, it usually calms down a little bit, but it is still powerful because blink effects are powerful.
Yes, mainly it's because Tulane. Tulane is so
Yeah.
A lot of those cards from that Brawl set were just really pushed.
Absolutely. I think they all were. Great commanders. Although with that as well, that's why I've actually, since the deck is built in such a generic way, I have Rune as a backup. So if someone is not comfortable with Tulane, I just simply swap the commanders. It makes it a little bit slower because I'm not having as much card draw or ramp as I am before, but it operates basically the same because I'm not running any of the specific Tulane tech combos. Like if Tulane dies, great. There's some games that I'll run him out just to make sure that he can catch the removal spell versus one of my other pieces. It's just kind of a distraction. So it does whatever it needs to do. But definitely can be scary. That one, I don't blame people because it's earned that reputation. But there are some times that there is disproportionate hate that happens, and you have some options to deal with it. And I'll kind of go over what I had to do in that game versus what that situation is. The first option that I try to present is, of course, warning. Second one after that is if they're going to be my enemy or like really scared of me, I'm going to try to buddy up. I'm going to be like, hey, I'm going to try to make some deals early on with you and just try to establish more of a professional relationship, as it were, in the game. So like, hey, I'm not swinging at you. We're buddies. Maybe I'll give you some kind of politic card where each drawing some cards or ramping and trying to deviate from that.
No, how dare you? You play Brina, die.
And that can happen as well.
See, and on that note, like talking about things where you have to reestablish certain things. One of the things we've been talking about is specific commanders. However, there are specific archetypes that get that hate that sometimes they just do not deserve it. A primary example at our table, again, this is one of my decks, go figure, is a Karth the Lion. Now, if for those who don't know, this is a 2 black and a green for a 2/4 that has a Planeswalkers theme. Its thing is when it enters or Planeswalkers die, you look at the top 7, you find a Planeswalker, and you put it in your hand. Also, I lied on the stats. It's a 3/5. My apologies. But when and it has this ability on the bottom that makes the pluses and or minuses easier to do. It changes the total you get. So if your Planeswalker is normally a +2, it's a +3. If it's a -1, it's a 0. If it's a -12, it's a 11, so on and so forth. That card in the command zone gets way more hate than it deserves. Like, it's not in the colors to threaten you in an infinite way. Like, people immediately assess because they just see that it's a Planeswalker deck.
And I think a big problem with that too, at least on the Super Friends side, is when someone's asking you like, oh, what does that card do with the Planeswalker? And then you show them, and their immediate reaction is, let's just see what the ultimate is. And then it's, oh, if that ultimate goes off, I'm going to die. So a lot of times with the deck that I've noticed is that you're getting the Planeswalkers on board, and then it just turns into combat whack-a-mole.
Pretty much. And there are some things that justify some hate. For example, it would be foolish to not think about the fact that Doubling Season is a card for Planeswalkers where it enters with double counters. It's foolish to not consider something like Liliana, who has an ultimate that is game-breaking in and of itself. And you're in green, you can ramp, you can get there. I totally understand it. But that doesn't also equate to, oh my god, he's got 7 mana and just murder everything he's ever made ever.
But you also got to realize it's not just the ramp. You're also in tutor colors. So even if you're not using Karth like go through the deck with just the planeswalkers dying, that means you can just use tutors to get the exact card you need, such as Doubling Season, or another one that I know that you run in there, Vorinclex.
Totally valid opinions, 100%. The part where I think it gets overestimated most of the time is the number of walkers that are actually in black-green that get you there, to get you victory. They are slim pickings.
What do you think the best walkers are for that particular deck?
Oh, it's 100% Liliana. It's Liliana where you go, I ultimate, and now you have nothing but a land, a thing.
Yeah. The other part about that is just like walkers as a strategy has kind of been overestimated by a whole bunch of people, mainly because of the really good Super Friends decks, like the Narset Super Friends deck. That deck, because it can pump out 4 planeswalkers with a single attack, can be much faster than Karth, who just puts that planeswalker into your hand and you still have to cast it.
Yeah, that's part of why I tend to be of the opinion it gets over targeted. They like it's in the value colors to get the lands. I totally understand tutoring all your lands out of your deck is a thing. You have Vampiric Tutor, you have all the tutors to find the things. All this stuff gets put into your hand. You have to cast it. You're in the colors to make the mana. Cool. You still have maybe a blocker.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't stop you from getting punched.
Yeah, and there's also just the fact that there's also cards in the 99 that also can spook people to no ends. Because I know that I specifically don't like building the Boogeyman commanders, because I don't like to have that explanation of, oh, but it's not that kind of thing. Oh, it's not that kind of thing. Because, like, I have the Prismatic Bridge, and I, like, straight out the gate, I tell them it is 1 creature Prismatic Bridge, and that solves all the issues.
Depends on what that creature is.
Yeah, but usually I also tell them it's Brash Tawner, and they're just like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, but no, for the most part, a lot of those were like, I had a recent game where someone absolutely treated the card as a boogeyman, where it was Krenko 10th Street Kingpin. So the guy saw the Krenko 10th Street Kingpin and was just like, I know too much about that on Arena, and immediately went in for removal as soon as I played it and changed turns. Like there was other threats on the board that at least I thought could have been dealt with perfectly fine. There's also my group hug deck where I absolutely know, because it's how it tries to win, plays Nekusar. And Nekusar is definitely one of those cards where people see it and they immediately throw up the red alert. It needs to go now, not later, now. So yeah, like, but for the most part, not many people are targeting the group hug deck out the gate, even with that in there, because, you know, it's not an immediate threat. But once that comes down, all eyes turn.
Now, I think with that as well, one interesting point to be made is that when you're looking at these types of kind of scarier creatures, like, okay, so Nekusar, if you in your mind you think that's a game ender and you don't have removal for the creature, what are you going to do? Play removal. You're going to try to just kill the person. There's been in many games that it's like, well, do you have a Swords to Plowshares? No. Do you have a Swords to Plowshares? No. All right, I guess we all just attack and take this person out of the game, where, playing a creature that may or may not be super scary. It really just depends on what your deck is built to do. There are certain decks that are using Nekusar just to, it's kind of an alternate win condition, but they don't have it as a full-fledged, I'm going to win right now. And if you have that point where no one's running removal to get rid of the thing, and your only option is, well, I have to go murder you, that's not going to be a super good situation for the person who's playing that particular Boogeyman card.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about the Boogeyman Effect when it's either the head or in the 99. Like, for example, Karth as the head, not that bad. Karth in the 99, please stab it in the face. Every single time. I don't care. Even as someone who runs the deck, if it's in the 99 of it, stab that dude just like you'd stab Vorinclex.
Yeah. And especially because, like, you usually can see that in, like, Prismatic Bridge decks, because pops right down, oh, hey, look, all of these Planeswalkers get to go right now? Hell yeah.
Yeah. There's something to be said for when the card is in a different position of the game.
Absolutely. And I think, on top of that, we also see the boogeyman a little bit at the beginning of the game, not from the commander, but from the colors you're playing. Certain people, feel a certain type of way about different commanders or different, colors. Like, for example, at this particular point in time, I have 3 different mono blue decks. One of them definitely should be scared of. Urza stacks, runs combos, big nasty. Don't get to play it a lot. I have a second one I built for my fiance, so she can kind of learn a little bit about holding back cards and resources, playing a little bit with the stack. It's a Siani Elegeth, scry, attack with a bunch of flyers, draws a bunch of cards. Eventually, I'm either going to try to win by pumping up those creatures, or I'm going to try to do a Thassa's Oracle if I get all the way through my deck so I don't just lose. But it's very much not being run at the power level. Like, I'm not running as the super expensive, counter spells. I'm not running the most efficient removal as possible. It's just kind of built as a very basic educational deck. And then I've got a third deck that I've most recently built, which is a Malcolm and Sakashima deck, where I'm trying to clone Malcolm as many times as possible and getting a buttload of treasure tokens, and then cloning something that I prefer that's a little bit better than Malcolm to win the game.
Clones, 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 clones.
So all 3 of those decks, very different strategies, very different builds, very different speeds. But when I see people like, oh, well, you're playing mono blue, they immediately assume this guy's got 15, 20 counter spells. If I want to resolve a spell, I need to kill him.
Yeah, like and that can sometimes be because like they know about CDH and just the fact that mono blue or blue in general in CDH will usually have those kind of counter spells. But even in a casual table, you should never assume the blue player has like 15 counter spells. That's a bad idea.
And there's also something to be said about the exact opposite effect, where someone sees Gruul and they go, you're nothing to worry about. And then on turn 5, they're stomping down your door with 40 creatures. And you're like, how did I get to this point? You're just red-green.
Or you hit them with a seed time.
Right. But the Boogeyman Effect is... There are places where it belongs and then places where it doesn't belong. And drawing that line, it can be a little hard just because it's got to be curated by your experience, right?
Absolutely. And I think, when you're in a game, it's really hard to deal with when somebody who you're trying to have them understand, like, look, I understand, like, you believe this is at a stronger threat than you think it is. We probably have other things to address. That can be a very frustrating experience to be in if you're going to just get hated out of the game and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah. And as far as a lot of that goes, and it's usually a good thing to at least validate that the person has the experience with another person. The big thing you have to do is say, I am not that person. Just attributing that every single player is going to be the exact same if you're playing like your Brina deck. You were not playing that Brina deck like whoever they were playing against plays that Brina deck.
This exact train of thought is like what we talked about in the first episode, is why I curated my way of approaching players I've never played with before. It's why I do what I do, because I've come to the understanding and my own opinion, if you asked me for advice on how do you curate what is and what isn't, is you need to go out there and experience the decks you don't think you're going to like. Like if you've never played against a Narset turns deck, no matter if you hate the idea or not, you need to experience it to determine exactly your vibe at least once.
In their defense, the people that are actively playing against the Narset turns deck aren't playing. So
I mean, yeah, especially with my recent experience and played CDH Narset turns deck, and I just kept saying, okay, keep going. Let's see if you can do this. Because it at certain points, it did not seem like they were doing anything and they were just kind of dittering.
I totally understand it. But part of the thing is if you cannot evaluate the Boogeyman, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at Narset every time and you have not experienced the type of Narset that's on this table, you cannot curate your opinion based on what that actually means. If I say this is not Narset turns, but that is the only experience you have, you cannot accurately evaluate what I got going on enough to assess whether I am really your threat or not yet.
Yes. Also, and as a huge disclaimer, this is in fact not intended for the people who actively lie to you about their decks.
Oh, that's a whole other issue entirely.
Yeah, hence why I put the disclaimer.
Absolutely.
If people are actively lying to you on your table, do me a solid. Either don't actively choose violence, but look at them straight in their face and go, no, and walk away.
I think when you have somebody like that, where it's either they're lying about the power level of their deck actively, or these are usually the same people that are in a game and you make a deal with them and they break it. It's one of those you just simply can't take their word as law. You have to be skeptical no matter what. Like, there are certain people, like if you're in an LGS and you make a deal with somebody and they break it, never make a deal with them again. Like they've lost that privilege. Like you can make deals with other players, but it comes like, hey, if you don't attack me, I won't attack you. No, because you've actively proven to me that that is not going to be the case.
Yep.
And, in that same vein, there are cards that are boogeymen, there are situations that are boogeymen, and there are players that are boogeymen. And you have to curate every step as you're going. You don't have to sit there and statistically evaluate each thing, but it helps.
Oh yeah, and especially with the players as the boogeymen, that actually leads into at least experiences with the brewery that we play at, where literally because I was very well knowledge on the game and just had very wacky decks, I became a boogeyman at that play area. That people would play against me, and one person every single time, I hate playing against your decks, despite me not doing too much. Like, yeah, I liked the occasional thief spell, but when I look at a whole bunch of those games, I was not doing as much as they thought I was.
Or another person at the other LGS we go to, his name is Kevin. Kevin is our local shop's boogeyman. Now, that doesn't mean Kevin always performs by any stretch, but the knowledge he has, the way he builds, when he sits down, people like to play with him, but everyone acknowledges him as the threat when he puts his gear at the table. Like there is no evaluation of what he picks because he picks at random. He doesn't allude to doing something super crazy, but people will watch him no matter what deck, whether it's brand new, a pre-con, one of his better constructed decks, because he has a lot of high power stuff. He himself just sitting there makes him the boogeyman, not even what he's playing. And people will over-target him because they're afraid of him as a person.
Though I will say that's mainly because within those random rotations, he did in fact have CDH decks for casual people sitting down.
Oh yeah, it happens. I'm not saying it isn't deserved. I'm just pointing out there are instances.
We may need to redact that point.
Well, he used to do that. That's the main reason why I put that in there.
Okay.
Like, yeah, he has taken some of those out of the rotation, but that didn't stop that those were still in the rotation at one point.
Also, I did mention the pre-cons were in the rotation. Yeah. So he's got the whole range.
It's also super problematic.
Yes, I know. Yeah. It's kind of why Kevin keeps having this kind of reputation.
Case in point, though, is we've specified there are times it's just not deserved. There are times it is deserved. We made that distinction. So I think that's as far as we need to take it.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. All
right. So, but with that in mind, Levi, because you've been kind of quiet, what about you for the Boogeyman Effect, or did you want to change?
So moving back to that game in which we had the Boogeyman Effect fully in play, it was a weird situation because normally with Brina, I don't want to put the counters on people and swing. I want to put them on stuff that I can use it for mana. I can toss them around for additional value. Possibly, I can put it on like a walking ballista type thing and ping creatures that are swinging at me. Kind of use it as like kind of like a +1/+1 counter factory. It got to the point that I was getting attacked enough, and I so happened to have Brina had a Swiftfoot boots on her that I just had to be the self-fulfilling prophecy. I just took Brina, built her up to big enough for commander damage. I just took him out. Because it's a point that I can try to convince you as much as possible that, the deck isn't as scary as you think it is. But if I'm in a game and one player's coming at me way more than the other ones are, that person's a lot more of a perceived threat to me personally in that moment because I'm having to deal with all of that. And after that point, if I get KO'd, sure. If I don't, that's fine. But it's one of the things that I had to change my strategy in that particular moment.
You have in fact become Obi-Wan on the high ground, and they became Anakin in the lava. They hate you.
Yeah, it's the point. You can talk to them. You can do post-game discussions to let them know that the deck isn't them. You can try to be an ally with them. You can go through all the steps. But at some point, if you have one person who's targeting you disproportionately, it's within your best interest to make sure that they're not at the table anymore.
Some people make you the boogeyman, and you're like, nah. But they put that costume on you, and you just have to be like, all right, well, stab, stab.
Hey, look, I have this convenient rainbow wig and clown nose.
Yeah.
So it goes. Well, moving into our final topic of the day, it's just a simple question around the table here. What is one deck or one type of deck that you've been trying to build, but just it's not quite having enough support yet, or it's ahead of its time?
Yeah, so at least a deck that I've always liked and I've had minimal success was a wedding ring deck where the entire point is making sure that every single player at the table had a wedding ring. The main fallouts with this was that there's no good commander to try and like get the wedding ring into your hand.
And for context here, the Wedding Ring is a 4-mana artifact. Says when Wedding Ring enters the battlefield, if it was cast, target opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. When an opponent who controls an artifact named the Wedding Ring draws a card during their turn, you draw a card. When an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring gains life during their turn, you gain that much life.
Yeah, it's a great card. It really stops Notion Thieves.
That is fair.
Yeah. The main point of the deck was that I wanted to make a very nice little theme of everybody being married at the table. It has garnered 2 different nicknames. One I got from YouTube, which was the Anime Hero Pro Tag deck, because they are marrying every single person at the table, or at least the one that I chose, which was polygamy, because you are in fact marrying every single person at the table. Now, the biggest pitfall is that there's no good commander for it that allows you to get that consistently, which means that a lot of your deck has to be filled with every single tutor piece that you can. But you also have to make sure that you're getting a tutor piece that puts the wedding ring into your hand, because of that very first clause that says you have to cast it. And the fact that if you put it onto the field without casting it, it does nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just sits there, looks pretty. 4-mana artifact, do nothing. But a lot of those can take away from things that you want in the deck to help make it work, such as one of the funniest pieces, which is my pet card, Teferi's Puzzle Box. It makes a waterfall effect when every single person's married.
Yeah, that is disgusting.
Hey, I love it.
Absolutely. So your idea of the deck is something that can just consistently get out the wedding ring, putting it back in hand, but just nothing in the command zone that's available right now. That's your...
Yeah, the command zone runs Silas Wren, and what is her name? It's the 4-drop white partner commander that gives your artifacts protection from like the things that you have from the mana value. I think it's Rebek. Yeah. It runs Rebek, Architect of Ascension, and Silas Wren, and it's good for the artifact, and you put in a whole bunch of like artifact synergies to try and help along the strategy so that you're not like totally dead in the water. But because that's your main piece, and at least with the amount of tutors that I put in there, because I put in quite a bit.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah.
Party doesn't start till the wedding ring gets there.
But even with that, it just has consistently not been able to either get a tutor piece, or it's bad tutor piece that can't like get it into my hand. It's really rough that I still want to make work, but it's currently deconstructed.
It's extremely hard in the colors that you picked and just in general to make that, because that's a group hug kind of vibe. Really hard to do much.
With your struggles in the command zone, mine's actually in the 99. So when the more recent set, March of the Machine, came out, we had the pre-con with all the backup effects. Now me, I love blinking things. I love picking cards up and putting them back down. It's my favorite. And I was like, oh, there's like an aggro way to play this blink effect, passing these abilities around. This is great. Problem is, there's not a whole lot of backup effect type cards out there right now, and very few of them are actually justifiably good to run in a commander deck. So I have that commander deck put together. It relies a lot more on +1/+1 counter synergies than I prefer it to. Like a lot of times the gameplay is either trying to get like a combo, or I'm trying to win with Voltron damage, because I'm just not having enough backup stuff to actually move forward with that plan. In an ideal world, it's very much I'm swinging in with this particular creature. Oh, you're going to block it. Let me flicker one of my backup creatures. Now it has first strike and an extra counter on it, and things of that nature. That's what I would like it to do. So I'm hoping down the line that we get another set that revisits backup. The only problem is that March of Machine didn't exist on a particular plane. Like we could expect to see, like when we went back to Eldraine, we got more adventure cards. Like I understand we had some in the Dungeons and Dragons, but we got a lot more synergy and support with adventure spells because we went back to that home, where I don't know if we're going to necessarily get that with backup, but I really hope we do, because I think it's one of the freshest mechanics we've had as of late.
Yes, and especially with that same kind of set having an issue with like battles, because like the battles were like very prominent, but it's going to be a little hard pressed to see what they do with other sets with that kind of mechanic.
And I'm really surprised we didn't really get any battles in Lord of the Rings. I thought that would have been a perfect time to get some battles.
Yeah, and another thing on the backup is it's primarily in color combination that doesn't have the full flicker support as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't have blue, which is the only like possible downside to having more of the tools to make the flicker work.
Yeah, white has a lot, but obviously, if I could throw in my boy Brago, I absolutely would.
If you could throw in Displacer Kitten, you could follow that strategy just as much as well. There are cards that are just in blue that support the idea, but you just can't put them in.
Absolutely. So because of the lack of support right now in the 99, it's one of those that down the line, I'm hoping we can revisit and I can kind of come back to that deck and, hash it out. But at this time, it's just kind of a +1/+1 counter synergy and hoping for the best.
Yeah, also flicker with backup is a little bit weird, especially because if you like had the counter on the thing as part of its backup and you had to flicker it and you needed to put it on someplace else, you just kind of lost a power.
Yeah,
from it, too.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I think for the strategy you were wanting, it's okay to lose that counter to do the thing, because that's more fun in line with what you envisioned anyways.
Yeah, it's what I was thinking was more, having some creatures that you're just going to hold counters and then other ones that are mostly for the abilities. But it was more about tossing the abilities back and forth on creatures that went unblocked or needed some extra support. If they're leaving the battlefield, maybe some like Ozolith types effects just to hold the counters down.
Which would mitigate a lot of what I had just said, which was like losing power. The Ozolith definitely helps with that.
But yeah, we just don't have enough meat and potatoes to have that really go off the ground right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you had to follow that strategy, you can get there. So on that note, the same vein of not enough support, and not the issue of colors though, luckily, is I have been working forever and a day to make an experience counters deck.
Oh, I like that.
So there are only 8 creatures right now to make experience work.
But Jacoby, what's an experience counter?
It's a counter that goes on you as a player. You generate creatures that have criteria, and when you meet those criteria, they give you more counters. So an example being something like Marin, when a creature dies, you get an experience counter.
But Jacob, there are 8 to choose from. How is it so difficult?
Oh, I want them all.
Ah.
So they're not in your command zone.
They're not a single one's in the command zone. They're in the 99.
Okay, gotcha.
And the struggle is not colors, because the deck has to be Wooburg. The issue is not commanders. I have plenty to choose from. The issue is I need to make 8 cards make the commander deck actually get into the action. There are only 8 possible guys in experience that are going to do the stuff.
And yeah, with that too is, you have to run the bad ones.
Oh yeah, 100%. You can run all of them.
Well, it's not so much bad ones, because each one of them is pretty decent in their own way. It's more of that some of them get into each other's way and then need to go in like different directions for it to work.
Yeah. I've worked it out to where I can make that. So normally a deck like this, it's creature based. You're trying to do XYZ. Certain criteria on the deck function differently. So instead of this deck, because one of the examples I have, there's a Phoenix in the deck. Athoria, the Sun's Glory, right? It's a 3 and red-white, 5-drop, 3/3. It's got a bunch of keywords, flying, lifelink, haste.
I like that.
On attacks, it gives you an experience counter and a 2/2 rebel. And this one wants you to attack a bunch, get a bunch of counters, go really wide.
Is it only getting a 2/2 on attack, or
You create the 2/2s based on your experience on attack.
there you go? Okay.
So this one in particular, there's a bunch of synergies with the other ones. Marin exists. So if you can sack the 2/2s, you can get experience that way. The Azuri works because it says when creatures with lower power, 2 or less, enter, it doesn't care what kind of creature, it just cares that it's a creature. It gives you experience. There are, more intricacies to this, but the point is there are synergies that exist between some of them, but you noticed how I only said 3 of the 8 creatures.
Yeah.
There are other ones where, for example, instead of focusing really hard on the Azuri and the Phoenix, you could focus on the enchantment guy. There's a guy who, when enchantments enter the battlefield, you get experience. And you could run a bunch of the enchantment creatures that are lower power to trigger it and Azuri and so on and so forth. But then you change the entire deck's formula.
Yeah, it seems like you're really having to spread out thin to get that, and then getting them out of the deck too, because you can't have an experience counter thing in your command zone right now.
Right, and it's okay that it strategizes towards doing something weird in the command zone to make the deck work, but the caveat to that is you have to more or less pick and choose which ones that you're going to focus on for the experience. You can't focus on Azuri if you run the other one of the black-white experience characters that says all of your guys get +1/+0 for every experience you have.
Yeah, Minthara.
Yeah, it turns off Azuri, so there's a time and place you treat it like a crater hoof.
Yeah, and I mean, with that as well, similar to Joe's situation where the party doesn't start till the wedding ring shows up. The party doesn't start for you until you get the experience counter creatures out and actually getting to do things. And then if you have Azuri, but you don't have any creatures that are, power 2 less that you can bring out to the field, then it's really not doing anything at that time.
Right. There's a whole archetype of like really considering your options. And unlike a lot of other decks where it's very straightforward what your deck process is, like an example being another deck I had issues, Curses. It's just all curses. Like you play them, you're good to go, whatever. This, every experienced creature has their own little caveat to the mechanic, which makes it super interesting, complex, and fun. You really get to start hammering out weird, fun little things to do at the deck building process.
But yeah, sometimes anything that you want to do is like there's just not enough support. Like even with some of the tribal things that they have been doing recently, there's just been like, yeah, you can have your nice little worm tribal. There's like 80 worms and only like 40 of them are good, and even then that's still like okay.
Right.
That's one. Yeah, that's one particular archetype that I've really liked recently. Was they made a Griffin tribal commander, which is almost like a Cranko effect, where whenever a Griffin you control deals combat damage to a player, create a 2/2 white Griffin creature struggling with flying. That's with Zerium Golden Wind. It's a 3 and a white 3/4 flyer. It's fantastic, but there's not a lot of good Griffins in the game. Where I'm more of the mindset of I'd rather just get a lot of extra ramp, some haste, maybe ability to copy that trigger, and then just have Zerium keep swinging at people, and then eventually get to the point that I could build up a critical mass outside of lowering the card quality to try to get a 5 mana 1/5 Griffin with no other abilities, not even flying, just hanging out on the ground.
Yep. Or you get the Urted effect, where, yeah, this was made for mirrors. And then they just found out, oh, this could be busted if we just do a Maskwood Nexus on every other creature that's really good with that.
Yeah. And, there are some instances where strategies, they're super synergistic and like, I want to do this thing. And then you fail to realize you're doing something completely different. And then instances like with this deck I've been really struggling with, where it's like you're spreading yourself in 6 to 8 directions and they're all very different. But the intermittent synergy that they all have is the part that I'm like, this is a cool idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's rough. We all have the things that we want to do and just don't have the magic cards to do them. Maybe we should write a sternly worded letter to Wizards saying, hey, help us here.
Yeah, they'll definitely listen to that. That'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. They would totally take our recommendation to heart, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of The Thought Vessel. Thank you again for joining us. As always, if you have a topic you want us to cover on the show or our blog as well, hit us up at thoughtvesselshow@gmail.com. Send that information. We'll be able to if we can get it on the show for you, we'll even give you a shout out.
And also, we'll be posting the episodes on Twitter and any of our other media. So if you can search us up on Thought Vessel on Twitter or on Facebook, please give us a comment. Tell us your opinions, what you do like, what you don't like, some possible topics you want covered.
Yep, just send us all of it. Just give it to all of us. Be the citizen of Earth, and we are Goku. Send us your opinions.
There are no bad ideas except for the bad ideas.
Yeah. And trust me, we would love to dissect your bad ideas if you have them.
They even like dissecting my bad ideas because I have a lot of them.
Yeah, we take some poison counters on that one, but it's all good. Anyways, thank you for reaching out today. Thank you for listening in. You have a good week.
Take care.
Bye.